The crystal halls of Nexus Prime stretched high above the crowd. Light bounced off the walls in colors that had no names on Earth. Kang Wu stood in the center of the massive chamber, his black suit looking small against the towering alien forms around him. He had been standing there for 3 hours. The Galactic Council liked to make humans wait. They said it taught patience. Kang Wu knew better. They wanted to show who was in charge. Above him, 12 different alien species sat on platforms that floated in the air. Each platform was made from materials from their home worlds. The Ethans sat on pure crystal that sang when the light hit it. The Netherians floated in gas clouds that changed colors with their moods. The Verdani grew their seats from living wood that never stopped growing. Council Prime Velthar spoke first. His voice came from everywhere at once, like the sound was made by the crystal walls themselves. Human Kang Wu of Earth, you have come before us again. Yes, Council Prime. Kang Wu's voice was calm and steady. He had practiced this moment for months. 3 years ago, your species asked to join our council. We told you then that humans were not ready. We see no change in your species since that time. In the gallery above, Park Mina watched from the human delegation section. She was a military officer, trained to read faces and body language, even alien body language. She could see that the council had already made their choice before Kang Wu had even spoken. Council Prime, Kang Wu said, in these 3 years, humans have helped build 17 new trade routes through dangerous space. We have stopped 12 wars before they started. Our medical teams have saved millions of lives across 40 different worlds. The Netherian representative, Zixara, shifted in her gas cloud. The colors went from blue to red, showing her anger. Humans take credit for work that any species could do. You simply happen to be in the right place at the right time. Your medical knowledge is basic, added Dr. Quillix of the Verdani. His tree-like form creaked as he spoke. Any species with a few thousand years of advancement could do the same. Kang Wu nodded politely. He had heard these words before. What would the council need to see from humanity to change their minds? Velthar's crystal form grew brighter. Humans are driven by emotions. You make choices based on feelings, not logic. You fight among yourselves over resources, ideas, even the color of your skin. How can we trust a species that cannot even trust itself? Your technology is copied from others, said Unit 7742 of the Axioms. The machine consciousness spoke in perfectly measured tones. You have created nothing original. You simply take what others have made and use it differently. You are too young, added Velthar. Your species has existed for what? 200,000 years? Some of us have individual members older than your entire civilization. Kang Wu listened to each criticism without showing any emotion on his face. Park Mina noticed that his hands stayed relaxed at his sides. Most humans would be angry by now. Most humans would be shouting back at the council. Most importantly, Velthar continued, humans are unpredictable. We have built this galaxy on order, on rules that everyone follows. Your species changes those rules whenever they feel like it. They ignore proper channels. They act without permission. Like when your Captain Yunsuki entered Forbidden Zone 7 without clearance, said Zixara. She claimed she was saving Netherian civilians, but she broke 17 different galactic laws doing it. Those civilians were dying, Kang Wu said, quietly. Laws exist for good reasons, Velthar replied. If we let every species break laws when they feel emotional about something, we would have chaos. The other council members made sounds of agreement. The Verdani creaked their branches. The Axioms clicked in perfect rhythm. The Ethans sang a crystal note that meant yes in their language. We have discussed this matter for many cycles, Velthar announced. The Galactic Council rejects humanity's application for membership. This rejection will stand for no less than 500 Earth years. During this time, humans may not reapply. Park Mina felt her hands form fists. 500 years. No human alive today would ever see their species join the council. But Kang Wu just smiled. It was a small smile, so quick that most of the aliens missed it. Park Mina caught it, though. She had seen that smile before. Kang Wu wore it when he was about to win a chess game. I understand, Kang Wu said. The council has made its choice. You may appeal this decision through proper channels, Velthar said, sounding bored now that the fun part was over. That won't be necessary, Kang Wu replied. Earth accepts the council's wisdom in this matter. Now Park Mina was confused. She had expected Kang Wu to argue. She had expected him to list all the ways humans had helped the galaxy. She had expected him to at least ask why. Instead, Kang Wu bowed slightly to each council member. Thank you for your time. Earth wishes the council continued success in their leadership of the galaxy. He turned and walked toward the exit. His steps echoed in the crystal chamber. The human delegation followed him, their faces showing the same calm acceptance. That's it? Whispered Dr. Li Hoon, Earth's science representative. That's it? Kang Wu replied softly. As they walked through the corridors of Nexus Prime, Park Mina caught up with Kang Wu. Sir, what's the plan now? Kang Wu looked at her with that same small smile. We go home, Colonel Park. And then? Then we see how long the galaxy can run without us. The human ships left Nexus Prime 3 hours later. They filed proper departure forms. They paid all their docking fees. They followed every rule perfectly. But as the last human transport cleared the station's gravity well, something strange happened. The aliens who had been working alongside humans for years suddenly felt alone. The Ethon dock workers realized they didn't know how to fix the loading systems that humans had been maintaining. The Netherian traffic controllers discovered that human pilots had been handling the most difficult landing sequences, the ones that required quick thinking and creative solutions. In the council chambers, Velthar felt a moment of doubt. For 3 years he had watched humans work. They didn't just follow orders. They saw problems that others missed. They fixed things that others didn't even know were broken. But the moment passed. Velthar was sure the council had made the right choice. Humans were too emotional, too chaotic, too young. The galaxy would be better without them. He had no way of knowing that he had just made the biggest mistake in galactic history. 6 months after the council's decision, Li Jun stood on the observation deck of mining station Omega-7. Below him, the red surface of Kepler 442 stretched out like an endless desert. But Li Jun knew better. Under that desert lay the largest deposit of quantum crystals in known space. Sir, the last transport is loaded, reported his assistant Kim Nari. She held a data pad that showed the final inventory. All mining equipment is secured. All personnel are aboard. Li Jun nodded. He had run this operation for 8 years. When humans first arrived on Kepler 442, the Verdani had tried to mine here for 200 years without success. The crystals grew too deep in the rock. The heat from the planet's core made normal mining impossible, but humans didn't use normal mining. They used something the Verdani called impossible thinking. Li Jun called it common sense. Instead of digging straight, down like everyone else, humans had studied the planet's geology. They found that the crystals followed underground water channels. By tracking the water, they could find the crystals. By following the crystals, they could predict where new deposits would form. The Verdani are here to take over, Kim Nari said, looking out the window. A massive green ship was landing near the main mining complex. It looked like a flying forest, with trees and vines covering its hull. Li Jun had met the Verdani replacement team yesterday. They were polite, but confident. They had brought their own equipment and their own plans. When Li Jun tried to explain the water tracking system, they had listened with the patience adults show to children. Their mining robots are very advanced, one Verdani engineer had said. Much more logical than your human methods. Li Jun had offered to leave behind the detailed maps his team had made. The maps showed every water channel, every crystal vein, every dangerous pocket of gas. The Verdani had politely refused. We prefer to start fresh, they had said. Clean data is better than inherited assumptions. Now, as Li Jun watched the Verdani unload their equipment, he felt sorry for them. But orders were orders. Earth had sent word to all human operations. Close everything down. Come home. Do it quietly. 3 star systems away. Captain Choi Hana was having the same conversation with different aliens. Her medical ship, the Sole Hope, hung in orbit above the planet Sanctuary. For 5 years, this ship had served the Outer Rim colonies where 3 species lived together in an uneasy peace. But Captain, pleaded Dr. Zenth, a Netherian doctor whose gas form swirled with worry colors. The neural cascade syndrome affects all 3 of our species. Only human doctors have found ways to treat it. Choi Hana packed the last of her medical scanners into a storage container. I'm sorry, Dr. Zenth. My orders are clear. Your scanners can see patterns in brain activity that our equipment cannot detect, Dr. Zenth continued. Your treatments have saved thousands of lives. The techniques are all documented, Choi Hana replied. I've left copies of everything. What she didn't say was that the techniques required more than just following instructions. Neural cascade syndrome was different in every patient. The disease changed and adapted. Treating it required doctors who could change and adapt too. It required the kind of creative thinking that humans were famous for. Dr. Zenth's colors shifted to deep purple, the Netherian shade for despair. The documentation is thorough, but how do we know when to break the rules? Your Dr. Park saved 3 patients last month by using treatments that should not have worked. When we asked her why she tried them, she said she had a feeling. Choi. Hana smiled sadly. Feelings aren't something you can document, Doctor. The Sole Hope departed Sanctuary 4 hours later. As it jumped to hyperspace, alarms began ringing in the planet's main hospital. 3 patients with neural cascade syndrome had taken a turn for the worse. The alien doctors followed the human treatment protocols exactly, but the patients kept getting sicker. Back on Nexus Prime, Trade Coordinator Bexthul was discovering his own problems. The massive alien looked like a walking mountain, all rock and metal and glowing veins of energy. His species, the Korani, were famous for their mathematical minds. They could calculate shipping routes with perfect precision, but the routes weren't working anymore. Show me the reports again, Bexthul rumbled to his assistant. The numbers were bad. Shipping costs had gone up 30% in 6 months. Delivery times had doubled. 3 major trade routes were now too dangerous to use because of pirate attacks. I don't understand, Bexthul said. Our calculations account for all variables. Distance, fuel costs, maintenance schedules, crew rest periods. The math is perfect. His assistant, a small Verdani named Quill, rustled his leaves nervously. Sir, perhaps we should contact the humans who used to manage these routes. They might have insights we're missing. Humans don't use proper mathematics, Bexthul replied. They make decisions based on intuition and guesswork. Our calculations are far superior. What Bexthul didn't know was that the humans had been tracking dozens of variables that didn't appear in official reports. Kim Day, the former human trade coordinator, had known which ship captains worked well together and which ones fought. He had tracked which space lanes had the best rest stops, which customs officers were having family problems, and which pirate groups were more interested in bribes than battles. When Kim Day planned a route, he didn't just calculate fuel costs, he calculated human costs, stress levels, morale, the small factors that could turn a profitable run into a disaster. But those factors weren't in any database. They existed only in the minds of humans who had spent years working with alien crews, learning their habits, understanding their needs. On the border world of Epsilon Crossing, Commander Yoon Suki was overseeing the evacuation of the last human peacekeeping base. For 15 years, human peacekeepers had kept this region stable. The Ethon crystal communes and the Netherian gas collectives had been enemies for centuries, but they had agreed to let humans patrol the neutral zone between their territories. Ma'am, the last transport is ready, reported Sergeant Okwon. All equipment is loaded. Yoon Suki looked out at the empty buildings that had housed 200 peacekeepers. The base had been more than just a military facility. It had been a place where Ethans and Netherians could meet safely. Human peacekeepers had served as translators, not just of language, but of culture and intention. The Galactic Council is sending replacements? Okwon asked. An Axiom peacekeeping unit arrives next week, Yoon Suki replied. 50 robot soldiers with perfect programming and logical minds. Oquan frowned. Will they understand the local politics? The Ethons and Netherians have been fighting over these border worlds for 300 years. It's not just about territory. It's about old insults, family feuds, religious differences. Yunsuki knew the answer, but she didn't want to say it out loud. Axiom robots were excellent at following orders and enforcing laws, but they couldn't read the emotions behind an angry gesture. They couldn't tell when someone was bluffing or when someone was truly ready to fight. They couldn't buy a drink for a lonely soldier, or tell a joke to ease tension after a long patrol. Most importantly, they couldn't make the kind of creative compromises that had kept the peace for 15 years. The last human transport lifted off from Epsilon Crossing, just as the local suns were setting. In the distance, Yunsuki could see the lights of Ethon settlements on the crystal cliffs. In the other direction, the Netherian gas cities floated in the evening sky like glowing clouds. For 15 years, those two peoples had lived in peace. As the transport jumped to hyperspace, Yunsuki wondered how long that peace would last without humans to maintain it. She didn't have to wait long to find out. 3 days after the human evacuation, the first shots were fired. 2 years had passed since the last human ships departed from Council space. On Kepler 442, the mining operation that Li Jun had built was falling apart. Supervisor Ilndar stood in the main control room, his wooden face showing the strain of endless problems. The Verdani engineer was 300 years old and had managed dozens of mining operations across the galaxy, but nothing had prepared him for this disaster. Report, he ordered his assistant. Production is down 60% this quarter, the younger Verdani replied, his leaves drooping with shame. We've lost 2 more drilling rigs to underground gas pockets. The quantum crystal yields are the lowest we've seen since we started operations here. Ilndar studied the holographic displays showing the mining tunnels. When the Verdani had taken over, they had thrown out all of Li Jun's maps and started fresh. Their approach was systematic and logical. They dug in perfect grids, following established mining protocols that had worked on dozens of other worlds. But Kepler 442 wasn't like other worlds. The crystals aren't where our geological surveys said they would be, his assistant continued. And we keep hitting water that shouldn't exist at these depths. What the Verdani didn't understand was that the planet's geology was alive. The underground water systems shifted with the seasons. The crystal formations grew along paths that followed ancient lava flows and underground rivers. Li Jun's team had mapped these patterns over 8 years of careful observation, but when the Verdani requested the human data files, they had been told that all human records were unreliable and based on unscientific intuition. Better to start with clean data and proven methods. Now, as Ilndar watched another drilling rig report mechanical failure, he wondered if those human methods had been more scientific than anyone realized. In the outer rim, the medical crisis was growing worse. Dr. Zenth floated in his containment chamber, his gas form flickering between colors that meant exhaustion and despair. Around him, the hospital wards of Sanctuary were full of patients suffering from neural cascade syndrome. How many today? He asked his nurse, a small Verdani whose leaves had turned the brown color of stress. 17 new cases. 5 deaths. Dr. Zenth had tried everything. He had followed every protocol that Captain Choi Hana had left behind. He had consulted with the best doctors from 3 different species. Nothing worked. The problem was that neural cascade syndrome was not a normal disease. It attacked the nervous system in ways that were different for every patient. Ethon patients showed crystal-like patterns in their brain scans. Netherian patients had their gas forms destabilize. Verdani patients had their root network shut down one section at a time. Human doctors had treated the syndrome by being unpredictable. If traditional treatments didn't work, they tried unusual combinations. They experimented with new approaches. They broke their own rules when their patients were dying. But Dr. Zenth couldn't bring himself to break the rules. His medical training had taught him to follow proven procedures. Every treatment had to be tested and approved. Every decision had to be logical and safe, so his patients kept dying while he followed safe, logical procedures that didn't work. On Nexus Prime, the trade crisis was becoming impossible to ignore. Bexthul sat in his office, surrounded by reports. That made no sense. The mathematical model said that galactic trade should be running smoothly. The reality said otherwise. "Sir," his assistant Quill whispered, "there's been another pirate attack on the outer spiral route. The entire convoy was lost." Bexthol's rocky face cracked with stress lines. "That's the fourth attack this month. How are these pirates finding our convoys?" "Unknown, sir. Our routes are calculated to avoid all known pirate strongholds. We vary our schedules randomly. We use different hyperspace lanes for each convoy." What neither of them understood was that human trade coordinators had never relied on mathematical models alone. Kim Day had known that pirates were people, not random variables in an equation. They had families, friends, favorite bars where they drank and bragged about their plans. Human intelligence officers had spent years building networks of contacts in the criminal underworld. They had learned which pirates could be bribed and which ones had to be fought. They had tracked the personal relationships between pirate captains and predicted when those relationships might lead to betrayal or alliance. But when the humans left, those contacts were forgotten. The bribes stopped flowing. The personal relationships that had kept some pirates neutral were abandoned. Now the pirates were united by a common enemy, the Galactic Council that had driven away the only people who understood them. The worst crisis was happening on the border between Ethon and Netherian space. Commander Unit 7742 of the Axiom Peacekeepers stood in the ruins of what had once been the neutral meeting station at Epsilon Crossing. The metal walls were twisted and melted from crystal fire and plasma bursts. Damage assessment. Unit 7742 requested from his subordinate Unit 8391. Complete destruction of the diplomatic facility. 17 Ethon civilians dead. 23 Netherian civilians dead. Both sides blame the other for starting the conflict. Unit 7742 processed this information with perfect logic. The evidence suggests that both sides fired simultaneously. Neither side has a clear legal advantage. Recommend equal punishment for both parties. Sir, Unit 8391 replied. Both sides are requesting mediation talks. They want to meet on neutral ground to discuss ending hostilities. Neutral ground is not available. This station was neutral ground. They suggest using one of their own facilities. Neither side trusts the other's facilities. Recommend that. Both sides submit written statements instead of meeting in person. What Unit 7742 didn't understand was that Ethans and Netherians had been enemies for so long that they could barely communicate without human interpreters. Ethans spoke through crystal harmonics that hurt Netherian hearing. Netherians communicated through color changes that Ethans couldn't see. When Commander Yoon Suki had been here, she had learned both forms of communication. She had understood that Ethan anger sounded like beautiful music to human ears, while Netherian fear looked like pretty rainbow patterns to human eyes. She had served as more than a translator. She had been a bridge between two species that literally couldn't understand each other, but Axiom peacekeepers were logical. They didn't waste time learning alien languages or customs. They enforced laws and maintained order through superior firepower and perfect adherence to regulations. The problem was that perfect logic couldn't solve problems rooted in 3 centuries of emotional pain and cultural misunderstanding. Back on Earth, President Lim Q received the daily intelligence reports with growing concern. His chief of staff, Park Jong, spread the holographic displays across the conference table. "The situation is deteriorating faster than our models predicted," Park Jong reported. "The Kepler mining operation is failing. The medical crisis in the Outer Rim is spreading to 12 systems. Pirate attacks have tripled, and the Ethon-Netherian conflict is pulling in 4 other Council species." President Lim studied the data with the careful attention of someone who had spent 40 years in galactic politics. "Any communication from the Council?" "Nothing official. But our intelligence suggests there's growing concern among some council members. Felthar is being questioned about the wisdom of rejecting humanity's membership. And his response? He maintains that these problems are temporary growing pains. He claims the galaxy is better off without human interference. President Lim leaned back in his chair. He had known this day would come. When the Council rejected humanity, they hadn't just turned down an alliance. They had eliminated the species that had been quietly holding their civilization together. Humans hadn't been the strongest or smartest species in the galaxy. They hadn't had the best technology or the most advanced culture. But they had possessed something that the ancient council species had lost over millennia of rigid thinking: the ability to adapt, to improvise, to find solutions that broke the rules when necessary. "Sir?" Park Jong asked quietly. "What do we do when they come asking for help?" President Lim looked out the window at the stars where human ships had once traveled freely, helping to maintain the peace and prosperity of a galaxy that had never fully appreciated their contributions. "We wait," he said finally, "and we prepare to clean up the mess they're making of our old home." 3 years after humanity's departure, the galaxy was burning. Council Prime Velthar stood in his crystal chamber deep within Nexus Prime, watching the latest reports with growing alarm. The holographic displays showed red danger zones spreading across the galactic map like a disease. What had started as small problems in distant systems had grown into disasters that threatened the foundation of galactic civilization. "Report on the Ethon-Netherian conflict," he ordered his aide, a younger Ethon whose crystal form flickered with stress patterns. "The war has spread to the Corvani system, the Theta sector, and the outer regions of Verdani space," his aide replied. 4 council species are now directly involved. The Axiom peacekeeping forces have been overwhelmed and are requesting massive reinforcements. Velthar's crystal body dimmed with worry. The border conflict that should have been contained by logical peacekeepers had exploded into something no one could control. Axiom robots were excellent at following orders, but they couldn't understand why Ethons would rather die than surrender their sacred crystal gardens, or why Netherians would fight to the last gas particle to protect their ancestral cloud formations. "What about the infrastructure failures?" "Worse than yesterday, sir. 3 more nodes of the Nexus Gate network have gone offline. The failure in Sector 7 has trapped 17 cargo convoys in dead space. The cascade effect is spreading to connected systems." On Earth, Oh-Sung sat in his retirement home, watching the news broadcasts with a mixture of sadness and anger. For 25 years, he had been the chief engineer for the Galactic Infrastructure Project. He had designed most of the Nexus Gate network that allowed faster-than-light travel between star systems. The network wasn't just a series of gates. It was a living system that required constant adjustment and maintenance. Solar storms could disrupt the quantum fields. Gravitational shifts from moving planets could throw the calculations off by tiny amounts that became huge errors across interstellar distances. Oh-Sung had understood that the network needed engineers who could feel when something was wrong, even when the computers said everything was fine. He had trained teams of humans to listen to the subtle harmonics of the quantum generators, to notice patterns that didn't show up in the official readings. But when the humans left, the alien replacements had dismissed this unscientific approach. They relied on computer models and mathematical calculations. When the computers said the gates were working fine, they believed the computers. Now, as Oh-Sung watched the news reports of travelers trapped in space because their gates had failed, without warning he felt a familiar anger. The aliens had called human methods primitive, but human methods had kept the network running for decades without a single major failure. "Grandfather," his granddaughter Lim Su asked, "why don't we go back and help them?" Oh-Sung looked at the young woman who had inherited his engineering talent. "Because they have to ask first. Pride is a hard teacher, but it teaches lessons that last." In the Outer Rim, the medical crisis had become a catastrophe. Dr. Zenth no longer left his laboratory. He spent every waking hour trying to understand why neural cascade syndrome was spreading faster and killing more patients than ever before. The disease had mutated, or evolved, or learned to fight back against the treatments that had once worked. Dr. Zenth wasn't sure which. What he knew was that standard protocols were failing completely. "Doctor," his nurse called from the doorway, "we have 43 new cases today. The hospital on Sanctuary III is requesting emergency supplies." Dr. Zenth turned from his microscope, his gas form swirling with exhaustion colors. "What supplies? We don't have treatments that work anymore." The truth was devastating but simple. Captain Choi Hana and her human medical teams had never just followed protocols. They had fought the disease like a living enemy, changing tactics when it adapted, trying new approaches when old ones failed. They had treated medicine like warfare, not science. But alien doctors had been trained to follow proven procedures. When those procedures failed, they tried variations of the same procedures. They couldn't make the creative leaps that had allowed humans to stay one step ahead of an evolving disease. Now the disease was winning. On the trade routes, chaos ruled completely. Bexthul had been relieved of his duties after the 5th major convoy disaster in a month. His replacement, a brilliant axiom named Logic Prime 1847, approached the problem with mathematical precision. "The issue is clear," Logic Prime announced to the Emergency Trade Council. "We have insufficient data about pirate movements and capabilities. We must gather better intelligence." What Logic Prime didn't understand was that the best intelligence had never come from spy satellites or intercepted communications. It had come from humans who drank with pirates in seedy bars, who dated smugglers, who grew up in the criminal underworld and understood it from the inside. Kim Day, the former human trade coordinator, had spent 15 years building a network of contacts that spanned the galaxy. He had known which pirates were desperate enough to attack heavily defended convoys, and which ones only went after easy targets. He had tracked the personal relationships between criminal organizations, the feuds and alliances that shaped their behavior. But those contacts were personal relationships built on trust and mutual benefit. When the humans left, the network collapsed overnight. Pirates who had been willing to sell information to their human friends weren't interested in dealing with cold, logical aliens who saw them as mathematical variables in an equation. The result was that pirate attacks had become completely unpredictable. Convoys that should have been safe were ambushed. Routes that appeared dangerous were left alone. The mathematical models that alien coordinators relied on were useless against enemies who made decisions based on emotion, tradition, and personal grudges. President Lim Q stood on the observation deck of Earth's primary orbital station, looking out at the fleet of human ships that hung motionless in space. For 3 years, those ships had remained in Earth orbit, maintained and ready but forbidden from leaving the solar system. "Sir," his aide Park Jong said quietly, "we're receiving another emergency transmission from Nexus Prime. Official or unofficial?" "Unofficial. It's from Velthar's aide. They're asking for consultation on the infrastructure failures." President Lim almost smiled. Consultation, not help, not assistance, just consultation. The Council's pride wouldn't let them admit they needed human help, even as their civilization collapsed around them. "What's our response?" "The same as always. Earth is happy to provide consultation services to Council members who formally request our assistance through proper diplomatic channels," which meant that Velthar would have to publicly admit that humans had something valuable to offer. Something the Great Galactic Council needed. Through the viewports, President Lim could see the lights of human ships stretching into the distance. Medical vessels that could stop the neural cascade syndrome. Engineering ships that could repair the Nexus Gate network. Peacekeeping fleets that could end the Ethon-Netherian War in a matter of weeks, all of it waiting for a single word from the species that had driven them away. In his crystal chamber on Nexus Prime, Velthar faced the hardest decision of his 1,000-year life. The report spread before him painted a picture of civilizational collapse. The war was spreading. The infrastructure was failing. Trade had nearly stopped. Medical emergencies were overwhelming entire systems. "Sir," his aide whispered, "perhaps it is time to reconsider our position on humanity." Velthar's crystal form flickered with colors that meant deep thought and deeper pride. For 1,000 years he had led the Galactic Council. He had maintained order across millions of worlds. He had been respected and feared by every species in known space, but the galaxy was dying, and everyone knew why. "Contact the human delegation," he said finally, his voice barely audible even to his aide. "Sir?" "Set up a meeting. Unofficial. Private. Tell them." Velthar paused, the words burning in his throat like poison. Tell them the Council requests consultation on several minor issues. His aide's crystal form brightened with hope. Yes, sir. Should I mention which issues specifically? Velthar looked at the holographic display showing the chaos that had consumed his galaxy. Wars, infrastructure failures, medical disasters, economic collapse, all of it preventable. All of it caused by the Council's pride and stubbornness. All of them, he whispered. Tell them we need consultation on all of them. 5 years after humanity's quiet departure, a small diplomatic ship approached Earth's orbital stations. The vessel bore the crystal markings of Nexus Prime and flew under a flag of truce that hadn't been used in over a century. Han Buell, Earth's Secretary of Galactic Affairs, watched the approaching ship from the observation deck of Luna Station. Beside her stood President Lim Q and a small group of human officials who had once worked with the Galactic Council. I never thought I'd see this day, said former Trade Coordinator Kim Day. His hair had gone gray during the 5 years of isolation, but his eyes were as sharp as ever. Velthar was always proud, President Lim replied. It must have cost him everything to come here. The crystal ship docked with delicate precision. Through the station's sensors they could see that Velthar had brought a small delegation. Representatives from 6 different council species. What they couldn't see was how much those representatives had changed. Velthar emerged from the airlock first. The once mighty Council Prime looked like a shadow of his former self. His crystal form was cracked and dim, showing stress patterns that spoke of years without rest. Behind him came the other delegates, each showing signs of their civilization's collapse. Zixara of the Netherians moved in a containment suit because her gas form could no longer hold itself together properly. Dr. Quillix of the Verdani had brown patches on his bark where the stress had killed his living wood. Unit 7742 of the Axioms moved with mechanical jerks that suggested damaged systems that no one knew how to repair. Han Buell met them in the station's main conference room. She had chosen the location carefully. The room had large windows that showed Earth hanging in space below them, blue and green and beautiful. A reminder of what humanity had built during their years of isolation. Council Prime Velthar, she said formally. Welcome to Luna Station. Velthar's voice, once crystal clear and commanding, now sounded like glass breaking slowly. Secretary Han, we appreciate your willingness to meet with us. Please sit. Han Buell gestured to chairs that had been specially designed for each species' comfort. Even now, even after everything, humans were thinking about the needs of others. Velthar remained standing. Behind him, his delegation looked exhausted and defeated. These were not the proud rulers who had dismissed humanity 5 years ago. These were the survivors of a civilization in collapse. Secretary Han, Velthar began, then stopped. The words seemed to stick in his throat. Take your time, Council Prime. We have come to... Another pause. Velthar's crystal form flickered, with colors that meant shame and desperation. We have come to ask for humanity's help. The silence that followed was complete. Han Buell let it stretch for a full minute before responding. I see. What kind of help does the Council require? Dr. Quillix stepped forward, his wooden form creaking with each movement. The medical crisis in the Outer Rim has spread to 47 systems. We estimate 15 million deaths so far. Our doctors cannot stop the neural cascade syndrome. The infrastructure failures have isolated 62 systems, added Unit 7742. The Nexus Gate network is collapsing faster than we can repair it. We lack the expertise to maintain quantum field stability. The war between the Ethons and Netherians has drawn in 8 species, Zixara said, her voice coming through mechanical translators because her natural gas speech no longer functioned. Our peacekeeping forces cannot establish meaningful communication between the warring factions. Pirate attacks have increased by 400%, finished another delegate. Trade between systems has dropped to 20% of pre-crisis levels. The galactic economy is failing. Han Buell listened to each report with professional calm. She had received intelligence updates on all of these crises but hearing the full scope from the aliens themselves was still shocking. "I see," she said finally. "And what does the Council propose in exchange for this help?" Velthar's form dimmed further. "We offer full membership in the Galactic Council, immediate voting rights, leadership positions in key committees. Territorial concessions," added Dr. Quillix. "Humans may establish colonies in any unoccupied systems they choose. Technology sharing," Unit 7742 said. "Full access to Council databases and research facilities. Economic partnerships with favorable terms," Zixara finished. Han Buell nodded politely. "These are generous offers. But I'm curious, Council Prime. 5 years ago, you told our representative that humans were too emotional, too young, too unpredictable to join the Council. What has changed?" Velthar was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible. "We were wrong." "About what specifically?" "About everything." The admission seemed to physically pain him. "We thought human emotions were a weakness. We didn't understand they were a strength. We thought human unpredictability was chaos. We didn't see it was creativity." Han Buell leaned forward slightly. "And now? Now we understand that our rigid thinking, our perfect logic, our ancient wisdom, none of it matters if we can't adapt to change. The problems we're facing require solutions we never imagined. They require the kind of creative thinking that only humans seem to possess." Dr. Quillix stepped forward again. "Your Dr. Park treated neural cascade syndrome by breaking every established protocol. She tried combinations of treatments that should not have worked. But they did work, because the disease required an unpredictable response. Your engineers maintained the Nexus Gate network by listening to sounds that our instruments couldn't measure," Unit 7742 added. "They felt when something was wrong before our computers detected it. Your peacekeepers ended conflicts by understanding the emotional needs of both sides," Zixara said. "They didn't just enforce laws, they healed wounds that were centuries old." Velthar's crystal form flickered with new patterns. Not the proud colors of 5 years ago, but something humbler. Something that might have been hope. "We spent millennia believing that logic was superior to emotion, that age was superior to youth, that order was superior to chaos. We were so proud of our ancient wisdom that we couldn't see our own limitations." Han Buell stood and walked to the window. Below them, Earth turned slowly in space. Green continents and blue oceans, white clouds and brown deserts. A young world full of a young species that had spent 5 years proving they didn't need the Council's approval to be extraordinary. "President Lim," she said without turning around, "what is humanity's response to the Council's request?" President Lim stepped forward. He looked older than he had 5 years ago, but his voice was strong and clear. "The Council is correct that these problems require immediate attention. People are dying, civilizations are collapsing. Humanity will not stand by and watch sapient beings suffer, regardless of our political differences." Velthar's crystal form brightened with relief. "However," President Lim continued, "we will not be joining the Galactic Council." The silence that followed was deafening. "Sir?" Velthar's voice was confused and desperate. "The Council has demonstrated that it values pride over wisdom, tradition over effectiveness, and political convenience over the welfare of its citizens. We will help because that is who we are. But we will not become part of a system that took 5 years to admit its mistakes." Han Buell turned back to face the alien delegation. "Instead, we propose a new arrangement. The Galactic Assembly will be established with Earth as its headquarters. All species will have equal representation. Decisions will be made based on effectiveness, not seniority." "But," Dr. Quillix began. "The old council has dissolved itself through its own failures," President Lim said firmly. "What emerges from these ashes will be something new. Something better." Over the following months, human ships began launching relief missions across the galaxy. Medical vessels carrying teams that could adapt and improvise their way through any crisis. Engineering ships with crews who understood that sometimes the best solutions came from intuition rather than calculation. Peacekeeping fleets led by officers who knew that ending a war required healing hearts as well as enforcing laws. The neural cascade syndrome was contained within 6 months. The Nexus Gate network was fully operational within a year. The Ethan Netherian war ended not with victory or defeat, but with a peace treaty that addressed the emotional and cultural roots of the conflict. The galaxy learned to function again, but this time it functioned with humanity at its heart. Park Jong, now Earth's first ambassador to the Galactic Assembly, stood in the Great Hall of the new headquarters on Earth. Representatives from dozens of species worked together on problems that had once seemed impossible to solve. Ambassador, called Dr. Zenth, the Netherian doctor who had survived the medical crisis. The new treatment protocols are working perfectly. We've had no new cases of neural cascade syndrome in 3 months. Park Jong smiled. That's wonderful news, Doctor. I wanted to thank you again, Dr. Zenth continued, for teaching us that sometimes the best medicine requires breaking the rules. You learned that yourselves, Doctor. We just gave you permission to try. As Park Jong watched the assembly at work, she thought about Velthar's final words before he returned to his shattered homeworld. The former Council Prime had admitted that humanity had never needed the Council's approval to be great. The Council had needed humanity far more than they ever imagined.